Welcome to the RapidWeaver CMS course. In this course, you're going to learn how to add online editing to your RapidWeaver projects. There's a lot to cover, so we're going to jump straight in here. As you can see in front of me, I have a pre-built RapidWeaver site. I've built this especially for the course, and currently this is a 3-page website and all the pages are using the Stacks plugin. It's also a static site, so all of the content must be edited from within inside of RapidWeaver. What we're going to do in this course is convert this site to be editable online via a web browser. And to do that, we're going to be using the Pulse CMS software that you downloaded in the previous video. Now I have that on my desktop here, and what we need to do is configure some of the settings before we add it to our RapidWeaver project. To do that, I'm going to be using Sublime Text. Sublime Text is a free code editor, and I would suggest that you use that. Alternatively, you can use any other text or code editor you like to configure Pulse before you add it to RapidWeaver. But as I say, I'm going to be using Sublime Text, and you can get that from sublimetext.com. So I'm going to open Sublime Text, and I have the Pulse CMS4 folder open here. We then need to go into the config.php file and update some of the settings. The first thing we need to add is our Pulse serial number here. To get our Pulse serial number, we need to go to the cloud.pulsecms.com dashboard. If you scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see your serial number listed. Copy that and paste it in here. We then need to go to the general settings and update the path variable. We need to add /resources. This is because RapidWeaver will publish this Pulse CMS4 folder to a resources folder on our server. So you need to ensure that this is entered correctly, otherwise the Pulse CMS software is not going to work. Finally, the last thing to note here is that we can update the password. By default it's demo, and we're going to be using that for this course. However, you can change or update the password in the config.php file here. Okay, once you've changed all of those details, save the config file, and then the final thing we need to make sure we have is a .htaccess file in the root of the Pulse CMS4 folder. If this .htaccess file doesn't exist with this code in it, what you need to do is rename the sample.htaccess file to be simply .htaccess. Once you have that in place, you can quit Sublime Text, and what we're going to do is drag that Pulse CMS4 folder into the resources area. So as I say, I have that on the desktop, so I'm going to simply drag that in here. And that is essentially all we need to do to add Pulse to our RapidWeaver project. The next thing we're going to do is publish this online and log into the Pulse dashboard area to ensure that everything is installed correctly. But before we do that, what we need to do is ensure all of the pages that we want to be online editable are using PHP. Now I would recommend that you convert all of your pages over to using PHP for your online editable projects. So the easiest way to do that is, if you're starting a new project, go to the general settings, scroll down and go to the advanced section and ensure that the default extension is PHP. By default in RapidWeaver it will use HTML. If we use HTML for our Pulse CMS projects, it's not going to work. Pulse CMS requires that all pages that have editable content use PHP. So enter PHP in the default extension box here and click Done. If you're converting an existing project, you'll need to go to each individual page, open the page inspector, and ensure that the file extension is .php. And you'll need to do this for every single page in your project, or at least every single page that you want to add online editable content to. One thing to note is, if you've already published your site, so you have an existing site that you've published to your live domain name, and you were using HTML by default previously, you'll need to contact your server or your hosting company to ensure that the PHP files are being served instead of the HTML files. This is key because on a lot of servers, the default is to serve up the index.html file rather than an index.php file. And it's, as I say, it's very key that the index.php file is shown to the visitor by default rather than the index.html file. As I say, contact your hosting company and they'll be able to set this up for you. Okay, once you have all of those details set up, we're ready to publish our first static version of the site up to our live domain name. Now, I've already set up my publishing destination, but I'll just show you those settings quickly now. I'm using SFTP, and for me, I need to enter my server IP address. For you, you will likely enter your domain name. Then I've got my username, and I'm not using a password. However, you'll likely have a standard username and password, but in my case I'm using public key authentication. So it's a little bit more advanced, but this is because I'm using SFTP and public key authentication. As I say, in your case, you'll likely have your domain name, username and password here. Finally, you need to ensure that the path is set correctly. Once you have entered your server username and password details, you can browse on the server and select the folder that you want RapidWeaver to publish to. If you're unsure of any of these details, you can contact your hosting company and they'll be able to give you specific information that you need to enter into RapidWeaver. But it is key that you publish your site to the correct path, otherwise the RapidWeaver project won't be displayed when someone visits your domain name. Okay, once you've entered your server details, we can go back to the home page, and what I'm going to do is republish all files. And what this will do is export all of our pages and ensure the Pulse CMS4 folder is uploaded to our server. Once publishing has finished, we can go to Safari and we can go to our domain name, and that is rapidweaver-cms.com. And there we can see our live site is up and running on the domain name. Now the next thing we're going to check is that we can log into the Pulse dashboard area. Now you might be wondering, is there any other setup involved to have Pulse running on the server? Well, as long as you have PHP 5.6 or above and Apache, you're good to go. We can now go ahead and log in to the Pulse dashboard. To do that, we go to yourdomainname.com/resources/pulsecms4/admin. When you visit that URL, you should see the Pulse login form. All you need to do is enter the password that you have set in the config.php file. And as I mentioned for us, that's demo. So I can enter that and log in here. You'll then be presented with the home page of the Pulse dashboard. The folders you see here are some default content that is provided by Pulse to get you up and running. We're going to take a look at each one of these folders later in the course, but for now we're going to be focusing on blocks of content that we want to edit. So we're going to be working inside of the blocks folder. Now a block in Pulse CMS is simply a section of content that we want to be able to edit online via Pulse. So if we go to our live site, a block of content that we might want to edit is the title here inside of the banner area. So we're going to now have a look at how we can make this title editable via Pulse. So to do that, we're going to go to RapidWeaver first. We're going to go into edit mode, and what you need to have done is install those Pulse CMS stacks. If you've done that, you'll be able to search in the stacks library for Pulse, and you'll be given a list of all of the available stacks for you. What I'm going to do is select all of those and add them to a new group. I'm going to call it Pulse, and that group will be available to us here. So that's just so it's easy for me to get to all of the Pulse stacks later in this course. Now, as I said, we're going to be covering some of the different types of content that we can make editable later on in the course, but for now we're going to be focusing on a block of content. So what we need to add is the block post stack to our page. And as you can see here in the stacks editing area, I have a banner, and then inside of there I have the header. Now you can't see the text in there because it's white text on a white background, but if I edit that, you can see it's the Add Online Editing to Your Website with the RapidWeaver CMS course. Now that text is this header here. So what we want to do is drag the block post CMS stack in above the header. So drop that in there. Then what we're going to do is configure the block stack. So click the I button and scroll down to the bottom here, and you'll see the block settings. What you need to do is enter the path to the Pulse CMS4 folder on your server. So for us, that is /resources/Pulse CMS4, like so. Then we need to give this block a name. Now we can name this whatever we like. In this case, I'm going to say banner-title. Okay, once you've done that, we're going to publish these changes up to the server. Once publishing's done, if we go and refresh our home page, what you'll likely see is some warnings. Now I have PHP showing the warnings on the page. Your server might be configured to hide these warnings. I've done it just so that we can see, or just so that you can see, that we need to ensure that these blocks are created inside of the Pulse CMS dashboard area. So essentially what this warning is doing is saying it's looking for a banner-title.txt file, but it's not available. So what we need to do is go to the Pulse CMS dashboard area and create that inside of the blocks folder. So click the new button here and then enter the banner-title.txt into the field here. Now you need to ensure you enter .txt, otherwise Pulse will create a new folder. We'll be looking at folders later on, but as I say, you need to ensure that you enter .txt. Now this is different from what you enter into RapidWeaver, because if you remember in RapidWeaver, we just entered banner-title without the .txt extension. So the key thing to note here is what you do is you use the name that you've given it inside of RapidWeaver without the .txt, and then inside of Pulse you have that name, but you need to enter the .txt extension. Once you've done that and created it, we are ready to paste some or add some content to this text block. So what I'm going to do is go and copy this title, and I'm going to paste that into the editing area here. Then I'm going to click Save. Then when we go back to the RapidWeaver CMS homepage, you'll see that that content has been added to the page. And it was literally as simple as that to start adding online editable content to your RapidWeaver projects. Now before we finish up this video, we are going to just have a look at how we could style this text to ensure that it's the same styling as the previous content. So currently we have this dark grey colour for the title, whereas we need it to be white. So the reason that the original title is white is because inside of RapidWeaver I styled this using the Foundry controls. So I specifically said I wanted this header block to be white. We're not able to do that with the Pulse CMS stacks. We're going to have to use either some custom code or some custom CSS classes to ensure that this content is styled appropriately online. So I'm going to show you a couple of quick ways to do that. Now the first way would be to add some custom CSS. So what we need to do is inspect the code behind this page. Now if you don't already have the Safari developer tools enabled, you can go to the Safari preferences, then the Advanced tab, and show develop menu in menu bar. That will give you this develop menu here, and what you'll be able to do is right click on any element on the page and inspect it. That will bring up these Safari web developer tools, and you can, as I say, inspect the code behind this page. Now as we can see here, the tag that's being used is h1, But what we don't want to do is add a general H1 style. And as you can see here, the tag that's being used for our text is H1. So we want to style this H1 to be white. And one of the ways you can do that is if we go back to RapidWeaver, and in the page inspector we can add some custom CSS. So in the CSS box here, we could target the banner wrapper stack, which has a class of .banner. So this banner stack here gets given a class of banner. So we want to target that wrapper, and then inside of there we want all of the H1 tags to be white. So we'll say H1, and then we'll say the color should be white, and we'll close off the tag. Then when we publish these changes up to the live server, we can go back and refresh our page, and there you can see that the text is then white. So now we have added the custom styling inside of RapidWeaver, and you or your clients can then log into the Pulse CMS dashboard and update this title, and it will be styled correctly. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be if we go back to RapidWeaver again. Now if you're going to want to style multiple blocks of CMS content white, what we could do is add that code to the global code area here. So we could create a custom text white class and set the styles for that class to say the color should always be white, like so. Then if we publish that change up to the live server, what you can do inside of the Pulse CMS dashboard area here is edit the HTML code behind the WYSIWYG editor. So by default here you'll see that this is outputting the H1 tag, and that is because we pasted in that H1 text into the WYSIWYG editor here. Now depending on how code savvy you or your clients are, as I say, you can edit the HTML behind this. If you click on this tab here, you'll see that we're using the H1 tag. What we could do is, if for example your client changed this to be an H2 by accident, what we would see, if we just save that quickly, is when we come back to our home page and refresh, our text is now back to the default body color. So we would have a bit of a problem in this instance. They might go in and edit the HTML and not realize that they can't change the HTML tag. So in this case what we could do is add a class of that text white class that we created a minute ago, like so. Then when we save this and we go and refresh our home page, you'll see that text is now white. So that's two different ways of styling the CMS content on your site. Now those are very specific to the site and the theme that I'm using for this RapidWeaver project. You're going to need to dig into the code on your site or your theme and target the tags that you're using specifically, or as I say, you can create those global classes of text white or whatever it is that you're trying to style inside of the global CSS area inside of RapidWeaver. Anyway, what we're going to do is change that back to be an H1 without the class, like so. We're going to save that. And then finally, before we finish up this video, we're going to go back to RapidWeaver and remove our static title that we had at the beginning of the lesson. So we'll go to RapidWeaver, and on our home page, what we can now do is delete the header stack that we were using previously, because we've replaced it now with the Pulse CMS block stack. Okay, then when we publish these changes, and we go to the live site and refresh, we now have just the Pulse CMS title on our live website. And with that being done, we are finished for this video. In the next video, we're going to continue converting over the content on the home page to be editable inside of Pulse. So we'll look at how we can edit these images and the other text and buttons on this page. So once you're ready, I'll see you in the next video.